Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross in Mountain View, California.
Each week here on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. This week we're hooked on The Planet Crafter, The Entropy Centre, and Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link.
Oh. A couple more
games...
Extra Life holdouts.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, I'm like, where did this list of games come from and why does it sound familiar? These are all ones we started during Extra Life, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been playing Zelda 2 for a long time.
Like 30 years.
Something like that, yeah. Terrifying.
Cool. Well, good. Have you fully recovered from your Extra Life marathon?
I think so.
Sleep?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ancient history at this point.
Feeling like a normal person.
Well, back to usual, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever your sort of base level is, DJ.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Fully recovered from daylight savings time turnover. How have you handled that?
That's also fine. Yeah.
Good.
Ready for the next one? We're ready to set it back. Let's do another hour to see how everybody handles that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is always jarring that first time you go outside at a time when you expect the sun to be up and there is no sun.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, no, I don't want to be the person who complains because it happens every year.
Yeah. I just think, imagine if you were living in, Norway or somewhere where it's like, oh, sun's gone. I guess maybe we'll see it again 6 months from now. Or is that the right country? It was one of those, once you get far enough north.
Alaska.
How long does the sun go away in Alaska? I don't know.
40 days. I don't know.
40 days. Okay. No, I'll just go with that.
Yeah. I remember that comic book that was like all the vampires and it moved to Alaska because it's 40 days of night. Isn't that what the comic book was called? Yeah.
I feel like they could do better than 40 days.
I'm gonna need to get.
Do they only speak English?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that's a good option.
They can get a longer night if they move to like a Nordic country, is what you're saying?
Right? Isn't that how that works? I thought that's how it works. I should do some research before I end up moving. Yeah.
I like a good day-night cycle. I like a good seasonal cycle. I like a fall and a spring, which you don't get a lot of in certain parts of the country.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, winters don't get too intense here.
Yeah. And Pennsylvania, I grew up in New England. I grew up in Connecticut. So it's, I have fond memories of very crazy winters and just huge snowstorms and, not being able to go to school because it was too cold. And that doesn't happen. Well, I mean, obviously the school part doesn't happen so much anymore for me, but we don't get winters like that in Pennsylvania. We get a freak storm every now and then, but it is generally pretty mild. And I'm not that much farther south than I was when I grew up. Although, I mean, obviously, from a whole planetary global warming perspective, we're in a very different place than I was as a child as well. So,
true.
There's that too.
Yeah. That's
like
why
a snow day.
Just telling myself maybe I'll move to Alaska. Maybe that will be my personal way of sorting things out.
Yeah. I think it looks very pretty in like the commercials for those Alaskan cruises and stuff, but I'm not sure if I could live that far in the woods.
Well, you don't have to live in the woods. They have cities there.
Yeah.
Or did you just mean on a continental scale, it is more in the woods than living in Harrisburg?
Yeah. I mean, Harrisburg's kind of in the woods too. You're not wrong. They do have big cities. That's true. They have 2 big cities.
That's still, doesn't matter how many they have.
Yeah. A big city is a big city.
Right. You're probably only going to be living in one anyway.
Right. You can only live in one at a time.
Yeah. Well, we'll get this sorted out before we end up moving to Alaska.
Yeah. We'll take the show on the road.
Yeah. Feel like, was it Pitbull who they sent up there to do that concert after the internet voted that he should go up there? We'll just hang out with Pitbull.
Is he still there? Did we forget to bring him back?
I mean, I don't think he was forced to live there. I think he came back. It was just for that one engagement. Although it would be amazing if he was just like, you know what? I'm just going to, pack it up and live in Alaska from now on.
I like it so much.
Set me on the right path.
I'm no longer Mr. International. Wasn't that his thing, no, Mr. International?
Mr. Worldwide? No.
Mr. Worldwide. There you go.
Mr. Alaska-wide.
Yeah, I'm just Mr. Juno.
Yeah. I believe that that was the name he used for that show. I have no idea.
We had to stop because I've exhausted everything I know about Pitbull here. So
okay, yeah, we're getting in the danger zone. So let's move on to the next thing. It's been a long time since we had some quality Pitbull content on the show, so I'm glad we're able to come back to it.
That's for those people who just message us week in and week out. When are you going to talk about Pitbull?
Oh, man. People tuning in for the first time this week are just like, well, I had a real different expectation for what the show is about.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so anyway.
Yeah.
Video games.
Where shall we begin? What's the Planet Crafter?
The Planet Crafter? What is the Planet Crafter? It's a good question. The Planet Crafter is a space survival game. Or should I back up even further? The Planet Crafter is my latest attempt to find a new Valheim. By which I mean, I want just something that's like a nice mix of like survival and probably base building, and is also just kind of a chill place to hang out. Like, I don't need to be super stressed in my survival games, and that's why I'm not playing, I don't know, like Rust. Sounds very hardcore to me, although I know that's very popular. Because I've just never been able to find something else that just recaptures that very precise magic that Valheim nailed. And I've had Planet Crafter on my list for a while. Sorry, go ahead.
But if Valheim no longer sort of captures that magic for you?
Well, it kind of tapered off on it. Like, I feel like I experienced most of what Valheim had to offer. Believe me, I definitely have moments where I'm like, why don't we just go back to Valheim? Maybe we just start a new Valheim game. That would be fun.
There's a thing in the Entropy Center where it's like a gun that rewinds time, but for the only for the thing that you pointed at.
Yeah. Okay.
So the scientists that are experimenting with it in the game have left emails all over the place that you can read, of course. And one of them discovers that he can rewind his own brain so that he can rewatch his favorite television shows over from the beginning without having seen them before. So it's funny you mentioned sort of, geez, I wish I could re-experience the Valheim thing over again. And I'm like, oh, maybe there's a machine for that.
I don't know if I want to necessarily experience it for the first time, though. Do I?
Got it.
I feel like a lot of people say that, but there's also something to be said about a second viewing of something. But anyway, that is a different conversation. So I've been looking for alternate survival games, and the latest one that I've gotten into is the Planet Crafter, which, yes, I did play a couple hours of during Extra Life. But essentially, in this game, you are dropped onto a planet which has no one living on it, and it actually looks quite like Mars or something, so just very dusty and red and uninhabitable. And it's your job to sort of set up all these facilities to terraform it. So you start out by setting up a little like living quarters, but then there are all these other concerns you have to address, like getting oxygen into the atmosphere and extracting water from said atmosphere, and just making the whole place generally more habitable.
Mm-hmm.
Heating up the planet. What else did you do in this? Like generating power to actually get all your equipment working. And it starts, you just very immediately get into a pretty familiar loop if you've ever played something like Valheim or any other crafting / survival game. Like even Minecraft is reminiscent of this, where you're just going out into the wilderness of this planet and mining ore. Most of the resources, in fact, I think all of the resources in this game that I've encountered so far are some form of like mineral. Well, I guess you encounter chunks of ice at points, but the rest of it is like, I found some iron or magnesium or whatever, and you just pick it up using your fancy little space drill / vacuum thing that goes into your backpack, and then you take it back to the pod you dropped out of the sky from, and plug it into your little crafting station. And from there you can build structures for your sort of space, or new tools for you to sort of traverse the planet more easily, or carry more items, or move faster, and that sort of stuff.
Oh, neat. When you first described it, my brain sort of went in the direction of like a Sim City or a City Skylines kind of thing. Like a world
it's
building,
not quite on that scale. Yeah. So this is in first person. You're just playing as one guy. So not exactly like a city sim.
But it sounds like there's an element of maybe exploration to it.
Yeah. It's a little unclear to me how much that expands between games, because I don't think it's like procedurally generated. I think you are given roughly the same map every game you start.
Mm-hmm.
Although I can't really comment on that because I've only played one game so far. I've only started one game. But I do remember when you start, it gives you a list of different places for you to like touch down in your pod, if I remember correctly. So now I'm sort of curious about how much that comes into play. But it's been an interesting learning experience. It like the first few hours of it really feel like, the first few hours of any survival game where you are just strapped for resources and you can browse through the entire item tree or like tech tree of things you'll eventually be able to build, and just kind of gawk at it and be like, oh man, I can't wait till I can build, a fancy like reactor or something, or like something that will just condense water out of the atmosphere, so I don't have to process all this ice that I find lying around to turn into drinking water. But you are just confined at the start to gathering up iron and these basic minerals to build your, the basic crafting recipes, so eventually you can like level up and start building the more advanced stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been surprisingly relaxing. A large part of that is because another option it presents you with when you start it up is it has 4 or 5 different difficulty modes, ranging from sort of a standard mode where you have you have like a hunger meter and a thirst meter, and then of course your oxygen meter. So the longer you spend outside of your little your outpost, those meters start dropping down, and you eventually either have to replenish them using like consumable items that you've packed along, or you just have to return to your base and restock, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so I browsed through these difficulty levels at the start, wondering where the sweet spot was, because I can't even remember if this was an option in Valheim. I think maybe it was like, actually I can't remember at all if there was like a casual mode equivalent. But in this, I ended up playing it on, I think it's actually called relaxing mode. And the way it describes that in the menu is that, all of your little meters decrease more gradually. And also, if you happen to die when you're out exploring, you don't lose any of your items. They just stay in your inventory, and you respawn back at I think the most recent crafting station you've accessed.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that sounds like probably a good way to ease myself into the game.
Yeah.
Because as much as I appreciate
the space zombies only come out at night.
Yes, you're not just wall-to-wall zombies during the day.
Right.
Really ruin my immersion. But just with the aim of like easing myself into this, I put it on this relaxing mode, because as much as I appreciate sort of the like stress of like, oh man, I have to get back to the base before my oxygen level runs out, or else I'm gonna, I guess, drop all of this stuff on the ground or whatever. I think it like what happens when you die changes dramatically based on the difficulty setting you're playing it on. So I think the normal one, on normal difficulty, you drop a chest with all of your items in it, which is like, okay, that's a fairly common scenario in these types of games. And then the next one up, I think you just like lose all of your items when you die, which, a little more punishing. And the last one is really like just a few steps beyond that, where I think it just deletes your save file if you die. So really, like people who have been playing the Iron Man mode in like XCOM or Diablo Hardcore or whatever for 20 years. Maybe that's more their speed, but that just sounds terrifying to me.
So, I mean, like a proper roguelike, it basically just resets you back to zero.
Yeah, although in this case, since you're not really, or at least I suspect that you're playing on the same map or roughly the same map every single time, I don't know how interesting that would be. Like, it would be cool to play, if it was like the Don't Starve style, where you're just like challenging yourself to last as long as possible in this world. I could see that being interesting, but what I've played so far, it feels like there is a very like predetermined progression. Like you receive communications from other characters in the world at certain points, or after you progressed enough along the terraforming path, which feel like they're very deliberately expanding on sort of the story and the lore of whatever is going on in the Planet Crafter world. So it doesn't really feel to me like a game that's meant to be played like a roguelike. But anyway, relaxing mode has been working out very well because there's so much less pressure to like pack appropriate supplies, I guess. I've kind of turned it to my advantage in that I'll be out exploring and I'll have my inventory just completely full of resources that I want to bring back to the base where all my crafting stations are. And at that point, I'll just go, well, I guess I'm done, and I'll just hang out for a minute while my oxygen meter drops down to 0. And then my character dies, but immediately respawns back at the base with my full inventory.
Wow. It just warps you back home.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an exploit, but it does work very well for how I'm trying to take in the game. So I think I'm very grateful to have this feature. You mentioned that the space zombies come out, but another thing I like about this game is that there are no monsters or anything that is just constantly antagonizing you on this planet. Like occasionally there will be a meteor shower, which is important because it delivers new minerals onto the surface of the planet that you can go out and mine.
Oh, that's clever.
I think there's like an achievement for getting hit with one of the meteors, so I assume that kills you. But really, so far that's been the only real threat to your existence other than just not having enough food and water and oxygen while you're out exploring.
So it really requires then that loop of finding, mining, collecting, bringing those things back, turning them into something cool and new and exciting, and kind of lather, rinse, repeat from there. That has to be kind of rock solid, and you're feeling it, it sounds like.
I think I'm feeling it. My take on it is it's not the most like engaging sort of crafting exploration game that I played, or gathering exploration. I don't know how exactly you would classify it. The way that the minerals are scattered around the map, actually, I think it feels very artificial, in that you start off on this planet and you look around and it's just like a piñata exploded, and in it was a bunch of iron and like magnesium and cobalt and stuff, and now that is all just scattered on the ground. You get to go pick it up, which is very different from how
it's just laying around.
Yeah, just just here. Somebody left it here. They forgot to pick it up earlier.
Got it.
And it's not like in other games where you would like be exploring a cave or something. You would find a vein of like, I don't know, I guess it would be cobalt or something similar in this game. And then you go, okay, so here's why I have to bring all my mining equipment to pick this up. But it's more like I need 2 more cobalt to finish this recipe. I'll just look out the window and, yeah, there's a couple just over there. Let me go pick those up. So a little bit of a mixed bag. It works out very well in that you never have to go too far out of your way to find stuff unless you're until you start looking for the really exotic sort of minerals.
And is that a concession of you playing it on casual mode or what was it casual? Relaxing mode.
Relaxing mode. No, I think the relaxing...
Or is that the case at every level?
I think the difficulty really only affects what happens when you die. So I don't think the placement of minerals or minerals or resources is different based on the difficulty. At least that's how it feels.
Got it.
That being said, it does give you a lot of excuses to just explore around the landscape, because you will encounter like different caves, or you'll reach an area where there does seem to be like a greater proportion of certain minerals and resources that you need. So in those cases, I kind of think like, if I ever need more aluminum or whatever. I'll just have to remember that aluminum field that I found and trudge my way back there. There are also a lot of like wrecked spaceships on the planet, and I think you get a little bit of explanation of why that might be the case as you keep receiving these mysterious messages on your communications terminal. But that's also sort of exciting, where you'll like see a ship that is just crashed up on the top of some mountain and think, oh man, if I can just get up there, I can like go through all of their like storage crates and see if there's anything useful in there. So it does reward you from just being curious and looking around.
Yeah.
But that's sort of been the loop. It's just, you go out and you find minerals and you take them back to your base and you build something that like begins to terraform the planet. Like I was mentioning, there are a bunch of different factors that all contribute to your greater like terraforming index, and those include like heat generated. So you have to build a bunch of heaters to like raise the temperature of the planet, and then what else do you build in this? There are I'm trying to keep it straight because there are a lot of things that you build that are like you build the heaters. And then you build a bunch of solar panels or like wind turbines. But those are just like, I don't think those contribute to the terraforming index. That's just so you can keep all the equipment on your base powered.
I assume you have to build like a froggy chair and a modern sofa.
Yeah, eventually you have to build a froggy chair. That's
wood
important.
paneling, yeah. And decorate your house.
Oh, the other thing is you find seeds, like seed packets, and you have to build little like foliage. I forget what they call these things, like vegetubes, I believe, that you plant these seeds in, and that generates oxygen, which starts to transform the atmosphere.
Oh.
So there are all these little like sliders that you have to start building up by building these different structures. And I think it's a little bit overwhelming just starting out, because I was like, okay, so I basically need all of these different components. So I would go out and I would just build one wind turbine, and then one vegetube, and then one heater, just to sort of like see what the effects were.
Mm-hmm.
But really, you just need you really do need a lot of each one of those. And I started trying to focus on like, well, on this expedition, I will go out and gather all the materials needed to build a bunch of solar panels, and that's all I'm going to build. And then I'll just have lots more energy, so I can build these other categories of structure.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, as you start to build more and more of these things, you will notice like definite effects they're having on the planet, to the extent where like the first real milestone that happens is you no longer have this like dusty red atmosphere of the planet that you started off. You have like a nice like blue sky. It starts to appear through the haze. And once you start reaching these milestones, you unlock more and more equipment you can find, or equipment you can craft, and that allows you to reach more places on the planet. In some cases, this was fairly interesting. Like once you raise the planet's temperature enough, some ice that was previously blocking different paths for you to explore will melt, so that sort of like unlocks new areas.
Yeah.
But it's mostly like this is the loop. You just go out and you gather resources to build equipment to raise these different terraforming factors. And along the way, you just unlock more areas to explore or different ways to explore them. But it's been very interesting. The latest thing that's happened on my planet is, I hope this is not a spoiler, but I walked outside of my compound one day and it was raining, and I was like, oh wow, this has not happened before. Is this supposed to be happening? But I think that, it's another sign of progress. And I realized that all of the rainwater was starting to accumulate in like lakes on the surface. And I thought, oh, well, this is exciting, because around the same time I unlocked the ability to build these like grass generators. So I'd build just one of these funny looking things, and like a sprinkler head would shoot out the top. And sure enough, a few minutes later, there'd just be all this grass surrounding it.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, this is cool. This is, we're starting to look like, I mean, these are the very early stages still, but maybe eventually we'll have just a very lush looking, sort of like forested planet, and it'll be very nice. But the terraforming, or just like the appearance of lakes, has thrown an interesting wrench into the whole process, because my initial base I had built at the bottom of this valley, because that's sort of where you start out. And at some point, I set up a larger encampment on higher ground, because it was just a larger area for me to work with. But I still kept a lot of my resources down in the bottom of that valley. So I think all my heat generators and power reactors were down there. And as this lake started to form, I realized this little sort of power plant area is going to be underwater if this lake gets any higher. So I had to come up with a plan for how to resettle that and just figure out better placement for all these things.
You've built your own global warming simulator.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's sort of the goal. But in this case, it's at least kind of under my control to an extent.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to give away how all the other things that happen as you're terraforming this thing, but I watched some of the trailers that show bases that are much farther along than mine, and it seems like there's some pretty dramatic stuff that ends up happening if you are very proficient in your terraforming. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. I don't know if this is exactly the Valheim replacement that I was looking for. It's definitely it pushes some of the same buttons, but it's just not exactly the same.
Right. Well, that's fine, because Valheim exists. You've already played Valheim. It doesn't have to be the same, right? It just has to sort of push the buttons in a similar way.
Sure.
Yeah. So one of the things I know that you liked about Valheim was it had a multiplayer component or a cooperative component. Is there something like that in Entropy Centre? You were playing with friends before, I believe.
Oh, yeah. This one is unfortunately single player only.
Got it.
And I don't think there are any intentions to add multiplayer, but I mean, that's also fine, because I can just load it up whenever I feel like and just, gather some minerals for a while. I'll throw on some old Star Trek episodes or whatever and just kind of chill out, expand my base a little bit, see how much farther I can get away from the encampment before my oxygen runs out. It's still in early access, so I'm kind of curious how much it's going to change. I know they are still adding a bunch of stuff. I believe a lot of the lore components were more recent additions. So, see where that ends up going. I'm not incredibly, I don't really need a game like this to have a story or, character depth or anything. I mostly just enjoy, building the base. But who knows? Maybe, I'm sure there are people out there who want that sort of thing in their survival game, so that could be cool.
Right. Neat.
I really just want to get to the point where I have enough resources to just build my ideal base. Because like I said, I already had to kind of resettle. And one thing I've struggled with is just finding a large enough area of flat terrain where I can put things down. And then really figure out what sort of living modules or facilities that I want on the base. Because I'm still unlocking a bunch of stuff. I just unlocked this huge biosphere thing, which I was well, if I had known that this was going to be a component, maybe I would have structured the base differently. But like I said, this is my first time through it, and it's been a learning experience. So who knows? Maybe I will just start a brand new base somewhere else, and that will be my dream base, and it will be amazing.
Can you break down things you've built before and kind of recycle the components, or are they forever? Okay.
Yeah, it's actually very generous about that, in that I think if you break something down, you get all of the components back.
Oh, wow.
So it's just kind of an inconvenience where you have to make sure you have enough space in your inventory and actually trudge everything over to the other site where you want to rebuild it. But like I said, it's mostly been a game I play when I just feel like chilling out for a few hours. So I think it's fine. I'll just do, some manual labor while I've got some TV show on in the background or something like that. Cool. Since there are no enemies and the resource management is very lenient, it's never super stressful. So that's definitely a plus.
Cool. So have you found any a number of scenarios where sort of death seems unavoidable? Can you imagine a scenario where you're playing on one of those more difficult levels and eating it from time to time, or does it not feel that pressing?
I think if I was playing it and that was a factor, I would be more careful with the supplies I bring when I head out. But even then,
less relaxed about dying intentionally, so you warp home.
Yeah, because right now I really just set out, I'll bring like a couple extra oxygen canisters. Because like starting out, you don't have a huge oxygen tank on your back. You can upgrade it later on, but that doesn't happen for a while. So I would set out with a couple extra tanks just thinking like, okay, so this will get me, I don't know, like 15 or 20 minutes of exploration, and that's fine. Like at that point, I won't be able to carry anything more, so it'll be time to come back. But if I was playing knowing that I would have to return back to the base at some point, I would just be taking, like, maybe I would take way more oxygen and food and water with me. Or right. This is something I considered, maybe I would even build these little, like, secondary outposts that were between wherever I wanted to go and the main outpost. So I could, take a little break and not have to head all the way back to the central hub.
Right. So
I think it would be manageable. I don't know if I would want to play it on like the super hardcore modes.
Right.
Like not even like the permadeath mode, but the one before that where you just lose all your stuff, because I think that's like always a bummer. Like if I can get back to my stuff and just it's in a box waiting for me, that's good. But if it's just destroyed permanently, then I feel like you might run into some issues.
Yeah. I feel like any of the games that I've played in the past where it's sort of like, if you die, you drop your backpack, it's got all your stuff in it. You can go back there later to get it, but inevitably there's, 6 dragons and an orc standing around.
Yeah, all the guys that killed you are just hovering around it still.
Waiting for you to come back for your shit. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like, that's just not like what I want out of this, I think.
Yeah, and that's not this game, clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although that option is there if, you just can't deal with a game that doesn't have permadeath.
Yeah. Have you played No Man's Sky?
No, and I heard
feels like maybe that would be right where you want to be.
Is there base building in that?
There is,
but that's like
there is now
a relatively recent thing. Like that wasn't in a launch.
No,
probably 90% of the game at this point wasn't in a launch.
There was not a lot at launch. No, yeah, but it was a lot of like cataloging and collecting resources and turning those into something else, or selling them to make money to buy more things and. Flying to new planets, building bases. There's a multiplayer component to that now.
Yeah.
And it feels very much like it's kind of gotten to a point, and I've not played it the most recent iterations. We're talking about No Man's Sky at this point, but it definitely feels like it's a bit of a choose your own adventure thing. And that if you want to hang out with friends and fly across the galaxy and do giant space battles, that game is there, or you can just, pick a planet or two, hang out, terraform, catalog all the wildlife, et cetera, and build a cool house in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. It definitely came up a couple times as I was playing this, because there's heads on the extra live stream and people were comparing it to No Man's Sky, and it kind of just reminded me that game exists.
Yeah.
But I've thought about it. It is on my list to check out. Kind of, it's like on the same Valheim list. In a weird way, it almost feels like there's too much in that game for me. Like I get that there's like different options, like there's something for everybody, which is cool.
Yeah.
But I also kind of like this game. You're just on this one planet, and you have this very specific task that you need to focus on.
Sure, I could see the appeal in that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I would like to play No Man's Sky at some point, though. Yeah. I think it sounds cool. If I build a base in that, can somebody else come in and just wreck it, though?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. That would be kind of a bummer.
I remember situations where you would actually overlap with other people were fairly infrequent.
It seems like it's the entire universe, right? So you can just find a planet that nobody else has been to.
Yeah, so the likelihood of somebody sort of like accidentally landing on or deliberately landing on, your little corner of the universe, the odds are not in the favor of that. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure sort of what level of damage they could do if they did find you.
Yeah, maybe I'm just being paranoid.
Don't mess my stuff up.
Yeah, exactly. But, no, I am kind of curious. At some point, I should definitely check it out.
Cool. Yeah, it's on the Switch now.
It
blows my mind.
I wonder how it runs on the Switch. I feel like I would play it on PS4, or maybe I would even wait till I got a PS5 to play it on.
Let's
see.
I'm not sure how it plays on the Switch. I don't think I've heard any sort of Switch specific reviews since it landed there, but it's only been out a few weeks, I think, at this point.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll check that out. Anyway, this is the Planet Crafter. Having a really good time with it. It's
Cool.
developed by Miju Games. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is a very tiny French developer. And also thank you again to their community rep who stopped by the Extra Life stream and sort of like, I don't want to say like guided me through the early moments of the game, but sort of like foreshadowed like problems I would run into later on, which got me thinking about what I was doing. I think they were alluding to the fact that I had built my first outpost in the middle, at the bottom of that valley, and it was eventually going to be flooded. But who knows? Maybe there's other terrible things that will happen later on. I'll just have to discover those.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Cool. So the game that I've been playing for the last week or so since Extra Life is the Entropy Center. This is a fairly new release.
You've continued to play this since Extra Life.
I have continued to play this, yeah, since Extra Life.
That's always a good sign.
I'm super into it. It's the structure of it feels very familiar. I don't know if a Portal-like is a genre, but it is very much a Portal-like. You wake up in a mysterious facility with amnesia. Everyone is gone. The facility is in a state of disarray. And you find yourself with access to a machine that I mentioned earlier, a gun essentially, that if you pointed anything, it rewinds time for that thing. And there's an AI embedded in the gun, of course, who is your narrator and sort of confidant throughout this thing. They are completely different from your experience with the AI in Portal. The one in the Entropy Center is not trying to kill you. At least not yet. Good. Yeah. But it's very chipper and funny and a little naive and kind of, does some of the world building for you and sort of tries to help explain what's going on. The hook here is that a number of people live at the Entropy Center, and they are puzzle goers, essentially. What do they call them? Puzzle technicians or something in the game. And they basically just work their way through the compound doing these very difficult sort of like time and spatial puzzles, which creates a pool of entropy energy that the center then harnesses to undo the horrible things that are happening on Earth.
Oh, okay.
So they have a giant...
But they're not like experiments necessarily, but they're like puzzles?
Yes, yeah. So,
interesting.
Yeah, unlike sort of the Portal experience where you're being experimented on, you're not sort of the test subject in the Entropy Center. You're trying to do these puzzles with a degree of sort of efficiency and skill, and the better you do them, it creates entropy energy, which the center then harnesses, and they use it to power their giant entropy gun, which they can point at Earth and sort of bring animals back from extinction or undo cataclysmic weather events. And et cetera, et cetera. So as you progress through the game, you get more and more information about this. It's obviously a big sci-fi hook. Since you're alone at the Entropy Center and trying to figure out what happened, where is everybody, where are all of the other people who run this thing and the scientists, and you find empty offices with computers that are still powered up. You start reading people's email, as you want to do in some situations like this, and start piecing together kind of, the personalities of the people that were there, maybe what has happened, some of the experiments they've done that didn't quite make it to final form, like rewinding your brain so you can watch your favorite television show over again, and fun things like that. But the hook of the thing is you're trying to build up as much entropy power as you possibly can to do something that I won't spoil here. And that means that you have to take your handy time rewind gun and go and subject yourself to all of the puzzles in the Entropy Center. And therein lies sort of the most Portal-like part of this thing, in that these feel very much like, at least initially, they feel very much like sort of the experiment rooms in Portal, where you have a sort of a very clear sort of exit, and you have a series of kind of tools available to you that do different things. There's mostly in the Entropy Center, they're blocks. So there's just your average block, which you can put on a button and it opens a door or something like that. You'll find in the Entropy Center that you'll have like 4 or 5 little buttons that you have to put a block on, but only one block. So you'll pick up the block and you'll put it on each of the buttons in turn, and then go stand near the exit and point your gun at the box and sort of basically rewind its timeline so that it touches all of the buttons at exactly the right time that the door opens for you and you walk through.
Okay.
Yeah. Eventually you get more blocks that create bridges that do what? That have lasers that shoot out of them that activate switches. You get ones that can that float and you can dump them in the river. They'll go down river where you can access them later to do the next step in your puzzle. So a lot of, as sort of the pressure and the stakes in this thing kind of build, and you get to a point sort of later in the game where the puzzles are really dense and have a lot of moving parts, and you're trying to sort of like envision, because it's all sort of time-based, like, how do I rewind time from the exit back to triggering all of these buttons and doors and lasers and switches and bridges that I need to trigger so that I can move myself to the exit. And yeah, it absolutely sort of pushes the same button that Portal does. And that you start sort of thinking, the hook with Portal was start to think in portals. And in Entropy Centre, it's definitely got me to the point where like I'm laying in bed at night, like rewinding time in my brain of like, oh, I could have done that puzzle a different way. What if I had put in the block here and then sort of rewinded it to this other place? And so yeah, it's cool. It definitely has its own kind of language and little sandboxy feel where you're kind of experimenting and trying different things, and some of them are pretty devastating and you can die or blow up or do horrible things to yourself or to the Entropy Center. But mostly it's a fairly peaceful experience where you're really sort of just left to your own devices trying to sort of suss your way out some of these things. One of the cool things that it does that is sort of very different from the Portal experience is that initially it feels like you're kind of like I said, in labs, in very confined rooms with a kind of couple of sets of very defined sort of, button presses and sort of things that you have to, conditions you have to satisfy to get out of that room. Later on, you sort of get into the kind of the Entropy Center sort of greater beyond. And it's a much more sort of naturalistic thing where you're like I said, there's a river and there's a beach and there's natural architecture and rocks you can climb and mountains and things like that. So Portal never really went there. Portal always sort of felt like you were in a laboratory. Portal 2, you did some exploration of sort of the aperture offices and stuff like that. But as far as you were sort of solving puzzles, all of that for the most part happened in the experiment labs. It's cool that sort of the Entropy Center gets out of that sort of laboratory vibe and starts to feel a little more like kind of a, if I had a cool gun that could rewind time in the outside world, how would I use it to sort of like cross this chasm or get across the river so that I don't drown and things like that.
Yeah, so you're even using it outside of like that, like the experiment or like test case scenario. You're just using it on regular stuff. That's kind of cool.
It is cool, yeah. And there's a couple of scenarios. They feel a little scripted, where you're either being chased or like an earthquake. It feels like is happening, and parts of the architecture in the office and the building and stuff like that around you are sort of crumbling and falling apart. And you're basically sort of running as fast as you can, but pointing the entropy gun at a rock slide so that it rewinds itself and climbs back up the mountain so that you can slide past it and run to safety, and a bridge that will collapse. And you need to get up there. So you'll stand on the wreckage of the bridge and point the gun at the bridge at your feet, and it'll rewind and sort of basically levitate you up to the top of the bridge. Those always feel super fun and kind of cool. But they do still feel a little kind of like, again, like you're a little bit on rails. They feel like these very sort of scripted kind of transitional moments in the game that are kind of getting you from point A to point B. But it's still super satisfying. Just
collapsed bridges everywhere that you need to, to figure out which one.
There's a little bit of that. I mean, like I said, the entropy center itself in the game is in quite a state. It's falling apart around your ears, essentially. So you do get a bit of like, I just need to move the rubble so I can get to the office door behind it. But the parts where you're running and trying to stay alive and the building's collapsing around your ears, it's super fun to kind of rewind those elements to, protect yourself and stay safe.
Can you only rewind stuff? Like what happens if you decide you actually needed the bridge to be collapsed? Can you just collapse it again?
You can't scrub forward essentially, but you can you can go to any point in its timeline, or you can interrupt the timeline. So you determine the timeline for things, particularly the things that you're trying to, the puzzle elements, the cubes and stuff like that. You can rewind them to a certain point in your movement. You can pick them up and start moving them around again to extend their timeline. You can have multiple timelines going at once. So sometimes you have to remember, like, which block did I sort of set up to push the 3 buttons, and which block did I set up to sort of fall off the cliff so I could catch it below. And there's tools in the game where you can hit a shoulder button and it will show you like a dotted line through space of where each box moves. And those are all places that you've moved them to. Did I answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, I just tried to get an idea of how much of it, I think like you were saying, it just feels like a scripted set piece rather than like, just arbitrarily rewinding things in the environment.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So as far as in the puzzle settings, you're doing a lot of the rewinding and sort of stopping things in time. In the sort of naturalistic stuff where like the bridges are collapsing and rock slides are happening and stuff like that, mostly you're just trying to rewind those back to a state of not falling apart so that you can safely slip past them. There's not really a lot of incentive in those situations to sort of stop them at a particular time in their timeline, or to want to, put the rock slide back in place.
And you can rewind like multiple things at the same, or not at the same time, but like you can swap between rewinding one thing versus another thing.
Yes, on their own sort of particular timelines.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's really cool. It is. I felt for a little while like maybe it had spent too long because it feels like a fairly long game. I've put maybe 5 or 6 hours in it so far, and I'm only at like 50% entropy energy, and the goal is 100%. So I feel like maybe there's probably another 5 or 6 hours left, if that's any indicator. The puzzles are quite dense at this point and have a lot of moving parts. You get sort of the quick ones that are pretty satisfying, where you get a little tally, a little recap on a monitor on your way out of the lab at the end that says, you generated X amount of entropy energy with this puzzle, and it only took you, a minute and a half or 2 minutes to solve it. I'm getting ones now. I just finished a puzzle tonight, actually, before we started recording, that took me 18 minutes to solve.
Okay. Well, that doesn't seem that bad.
No, it's not terrible, but it's definitely, you don't get sort of that immediate satisfaction of walking into that room and going, that has to go there, and I have to stand there at the same time, and then rewind it, and then and your legs slide through the door and feel super victorious after, quickly identifying what the solution is. There are ones where...
Oh, sure.
And again, like Portal 2, it's a lot of experimentation. It's you sort of like, if I put this here and I put this here and I rewind and I stand here, what happens? Let's see. No, that didn't work. Hit the reset button. And it's cool that the game has a reset button that just puts everything back to 0, erases the timeline on all your objects.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that seems
and immediately snaps you back to the place where you started the room or the puzzle. And you can just, try and try again. That 18 minutes probably took, 3 or 4 failed experiments in time manipulation to get to the point where, like, yes, I think I got it, which is, again, very, very satisfying. I like that, that little brain trigger immensely in a puzzle game like this. So it's cool. I'm into the characterization. I think the little AI and the gun is super fun. You do get sort of like evil maintenance robots that come for you later. But you use your time manipulation to sort of get around them too, which is fun and satisfying. I think there's enough sort of variety to it that it doesn't just sort of feel like you're sort of slavishly trying to get through puzzle after puzzle after puzzle after puzzle, that there's some exploration, there's a little bit of world building, there's the greater mystery you're trying to solve. And it does a lot. I think it's a fairly impressive package for something that is an indie game, I believe, sort of developed by 2 developers. It is I watched the credits at one point. You can trigger those at any time from the start screen, and it's very short. There's just a couple of names on it, and I was like, that's even more impressive that this was assembled by just a few people. So it's cool. I'm having a really, really good time with it. I'm playing it on the PS5. I believe it's on PS4 and Xbox as well. I don't know if it's on Steam. It would make sense that it would be, but I can't.
I think it is. Yeah, I think I've seen it.
Vouch for that right now. But I really, really like it a lot. If you like puzzle games, if you like exploration games, if you like manipulating physics in games and trying to sort of like, break them a little bit, a la some of the, puzzle chambers in Zelda, Breath of the Wild and stuff like that. I think the Entropy Center kind of hits all of those fun buttons.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide whether I could actually deal with playing this. Because the whole time rewinding thing sounds very unintuitive, but maybe if I spend more time with it, it would just click.
Yeah.
But I remember trying to play that. I feel like Portal somehow nailed the exact balance of being this slightly unintuitive, weird mechanic that was also just. It actually was very intuitive, and it was when they started adding all the other weird stuff in Portal 2 where I felt like things were just on the verge of coming apart at the seams. I think I may just run into a puzzle that I'm unable to solve because I just can't comprehend what's going on. But somehow made it through that entire thing. Hearing you describe some of the puzzles in this, though, I'm kind of wondering, I really don't want to get to the point where I just can't make any more progress because I'm just too stupid to get through the next puzzle. So I wonder how that would end up shaking out.
I have not had any of those sort of brick wall moments. I think one of the things, maybe I thought I was starting earlier, and I'm not sure if I finished, is that I felt for a long time like the game was holding my hand a little too much, kind of teaching me the mechanics and stuff at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm further in and I feel like the puzzles are much denser and have a lot more moving parts, I sort of see the value in it being a little more sort of channeled and a little a lot of 30 to 45 second long puzzles back to back where I'm just sort of this needs to get harder faster. Okay. And then when it does, you're like, oh wait, pull it back a little bit, guys. I have not had to Google any solutions yet. I think the tools are really sort of adeptly kind of built for you to be able to kind of experiment and keep track of what you're trying to do. I haven't had to sort of draw any diagrams or anything like that. I have had the benefit of Sarah sitting on the couch across from me and calling out ideas every now and then when I get stumped.
Yeah.
So maybe there is some value in having two brains kind of wrapped around some of these challenges. Yeah, I don't think it's so, at least thus far, like I said, I'm probably about halfway through it. I don't think it's so dense that you would storm away in frustration or have to maybe Google some of the solutions.
Okay.
And I played Portal 2 with you co-op, and you and I think we're pretty equally matched in terms of coming up with just ridiculous ideas for how to get through some of those of those challenges.
We made it through that entire game without a guide, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Well, okay. Maybe I should give myself more credit. Maybe I will do that.
I think one of the things that Portal 2, and I've that is a high water game for me. If I had to sort of make what are your top 5 of all time, that would easily be in the list somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things I really like about that game is you kind of experimenting on yourself, flinging yourself through those portals, throwing yourself off of a high ledge to pick up as much speed and build up as much momentum as possible so that you shoot out the portal on the other side at high speed to cross a huge chasm. That feels awesome in Portal. And there's nothing in the Entropy Center that quite feels like that good. It really is you manipulating a lot of boxes and pushing buttons and things like that. So there's a couple of flinging platforms that you stand on and then they launch you across the room. And I'm like, that feels like a Portal moment. That feels super cool. But the game really only uses it as a way of kind of getting around as a transportation tool more than anything. It's not really sort of part of the solution.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely has a different vibe in that regard, but the solutions in the Entropy Center are still very satisfying when you find them. And it's just cool to kind of futz around with that gun and see what you can do.
Any fun Easter eggs you can get from just rewinding unexpected stuff?
I found, I keep finding little hidden areas. I keep finding tools that I can kind of manipulate to get outside of what feels like sort of the puzzle area into kind of secret rooms and other places. The bridge one, you get a box that if you put it down, it sends a light bridge that you can walk on. And the light just goes forever until it hits a solid object. So I have been able to sort of cross mile-long bridges into places that feel way out of bounds in this game and have more offices and cool terminals with hidden information and little secrets in them and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been really fun to sort of know that the developers anticipated that to a certain degree and are hiding stuff in the background. So yeah, I think that's super fun too. It's not as funny or weirdly irreverent as the Portal game is, but that's very much the Portal brand. And I think if the Entropy Center tried to sort of like do that, it would just come across as a copy or a cheap copy. It still definitely kind of is its own thing.
That goes it's so hand in hand with just what Portal is, just a weird sense of humor.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't need to be in every game like this. I keep thinking of, what was the other game? Quantum Conundrum, which is kind of, it felt like it was very, or was trying to be very similar to Portal in many respects. And I was just like,
very, yes. Yeah.
So you end up just coming across as like, well, here's like the store brand Portal game, because they haven't made another Portal game in a while, and we really wanted to make this other one. So yeah, I guess that's one example of when it didn't quite land as well with me.
Yeah. I like that game too. I found that satisfying. And I think there's a connection there, right? Isn't the developer on that was also a developer on Portal?
Right, yes. That was the other thing I was thinking of when I was like, I feel like the way, like the puzzle mechanics in this are just not as intuitive as they were in Portal. And also not quite as interesting, like you said. Like in Portal, you're flinging yourself around the room as a puzzle solution occasionally. And I don't remember that being as much of a thing in Quantum Conundrum.
No, you're right.
Not that I need to fling myself around a room for a game to be interesting, but it felt like you were just manipulating a lot of blocks along this like not incredibly intuitive axis. And yeah, I don't know. It was kind of a miss for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's sort of enough room in, if you think of like a Portal-like or a Zelda-like or an Animal Crossing-like a life sim, like you can sort of touch back to those sort of like touch back to Animal Crossing, to Portal, to Zelda in a way that feels like a tribute to that without just repeating it. I don't need a remake of Portal 2. I've played that game. It exists. Like I can go play it again if I want to. But like, what can you do with that tool set to create your own world and your own set of rules and something that sort of feels like a Portal experience? And I think Quantum Conundrum touched on that, but didn't quite go all the way. Entropy Center gets it. They understood the assignment. So I give them a lot of credit for like, there are moments in this game that I get the same rush that I got when completing some of the real tough puzzles in Portal and Portal 2. And the Entropy Center provides those, but it still sort of feels like kind of its own thing.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, one of the impressions I got from looking at it was just like, oh, is somebody just trying to make Portal again? But so it's cool that they're, it sounds like they're doing a bit of their own thing as well.
Yeah, very much so. Speaking of Zelda.
So
I'll say again that was the Entropy Center, available wherever video games are sold.
Man, should I push Zelda again? I don't want to like rush through it. We're kind of at the end of the hour. So maybe I'll talk about it next week. I do really want to get into it because I'm having such a good time with it.
Okay.
It's on the Zelda. It's on the Zelda Online thing. It's on the Nintendo Switch Online thing. You can just play Zelda 2 if you want. It's terrific.
Yeah, nice.
Long story short, like I've been having a really good time with it, so I'm looking forward to getting into it at some point. Maybe by next week I will have been able to wrap it up. So We'll see how it goes.
Well, with apologies to anybody who came for just Zelda 2 content.
Yes. Oh man. Also, who are you? Who is that mysterious person?
We should wrap this thing up then. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. Still hanging in there, still on Twitter. Have not made the move to Mastodon yet. Yep.
I've been trying to figure out what to do. Like people listening to the show, that's fine. They just got the show whatever way. But we're on all the other places, I guess, that you were about to read off. In case Twitter should no longer exist unexpectedly.
If somebody makes a $44 million mistake.
No.
Billion
yeah.
With a B. Yes. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com.
There it is. That's not going anywhere.
Anybody would like to buy that for $44 billion, it is for sale.
Oh, yeah, correction. Yeah, if somebody pays us $44 billion for that, it's gone. They can just do whatever they want with it. We'll just call the show something else.
I would go half price. I would say $22 billion. I'm sold.
I'd do it for $44 million. It's a bargain at that point.
I think I'm with you, DJ. All right. You should join us on Discord. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. Hang out with us, chat about video games, chat about what your favorite Mountain Dew flavors. There are a lot of them.
It's a contentious topic.
Strange video game candies. We've had a little bit of that going on lately. Plus, all the Animal Crossing and Monster Hunter and Final Fantasy you could possibly shake a stick at.
Yeah. All that good stuff.
Please subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. We're on a lot of them. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Help us out. Maybe tell your friends about the show, too. That goes a long way. That would be a beautiful Christmas gift to DJ and I. Excuse me, a holiday gift.
Yeah.
A non-denominational holiday of your choice gift to DJ and I. Tell your friends about the show.
Yeah.
We would appreciate that immensely.
But please, give your friend also a nice, sort of thoughtful gift alongside Video Game Hangover. Don't just give them a podcast for Christmas.
Cash is fine. Gift cards, your choice.
Sure. Anyway, we want to give thanks again to Saria Lemus for our intro and outro music this week. If you'd like to hear more of our work, you can go to pettypanol.bandcamp.com, put a bunch of albums in your cart, and just bump that total up to $44 billion. I'm sure she would appreciate that.
$44 billion on MP3s.
Yeah. Imagine how many MP3s you could buy with that.
A lot. Cool. We'll be back next week with all the Zelda 2 you could ever want. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.